I didn't come over because I wanted to. That's the lie I've been repeating to myself since that afternoon. When my phone buzzed with "come by the shop if you're free," I assumed it was just another favor. Lifting something heavy, killing time, listening to him complain about customers who didn't know what an alternator was. I even almost ignored it. It was late. I smelled like grease. I told myself I'd go tomorrow. But something in the way he didn't add a reason made me grab my jacket anyway. The repair shop sat behind his family's old house, half garage, half storage, the kind of place where dust never really settles. I parked crooked like I always did, rehearsing whatever casual greeting I'd use. I knocked once hard. The door opened almost immediately. She stood there barefoot, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned loosely like she'd given up halfway through fixing it. Not dressed to impress. Not trying. Just there. Calm. Solid. Like she belonged exactly where she was standing. She smiled before I could speak. "Oh," she said, tilting her head. "I was hoping it was you." The sentence landed wrong. In a way I still haven't figured out how to explain. Not flirtatious. Not surprised. Just specific. I hesitated long enough that she noticed. Her smile didn't fade, but it changed, less certain, more curious. "Come in," she added, stepping aside. The shop smelled like oil and old wood. The radio hummed quietly from somewhere in the back. My friend wasn't there yet. Tools lay scattered like he'd been interrupted mid-thought. "She's my sister," he'd said once, months ago, casually, like it was irrelevant. I'd pictured someone loud, or distant, or invisible. Instead, she handed me a rag without asking and nodded toward my hands. I hadn't realized I'd been gripping my keys too tightly. "You always do that," she said. "Do what?" "Hold things like they're about to run away." I laughed too fast. "Habit." She leaned against the workbench, crossing her arms, watching me in a way that wasn't obvious but wasn't nothing either. Her eyes didn't rush. They stayed where they landed. "So," she said, "he called you again?" "Yeah." A pause stretched between us. Not awkward. Not comfortable. Just present. The kind that asks a question without words. "He's late," she said finally. "If you want to leave, I'm fine," I said, cutting in too quickly. She noticed. I could tell by the way one eyebrow lifted just slightly. She turned away to pour coffee into a chipped mug, then held it out to me. "It's been sitting," she warned. I took it anyway. It was lukewarm. Bitter. Perfectly ordinary. "Thanks." Our fingers brushed when I took the mug. Barely. Accidentally. She didn't pull away right away. Neither did I. She looked down at our hands like she was surprised they were there. Then she let go. That was it. Nothing dramatic. No music. No spark you could point to and say there. But something shifted. We talked about small things. Weather, the shop, how long she'd been back in town. She answered without giving too much. When I asked questions, she didn't dodge them. She just left spaces. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the door, then back at me, like she was checking the shape of the moment. When my friend finally pulled in, keys jangling, she stepped away first. The air cooled. The space widened. Later, driving home, I kept replaying that first second. The door opening, her smile, the way she said it like it mattered who was standing there. "I was hoping it was you." I still don't know why she said it. I just know I haven't stopped hearing it since. The next time I saw her, it wasn't accidental. My friend asked if I could help catalog some old parts in the back room. Boxes he'd been meaning to sort for years. When I showed up, he wasn't even there yet. She was. Sitting on the concrete floor, back against a shelf, surrounded by open boxes and handwritten labels that had faded to a grayish blur. "You're early," she said, not looking up. "So are you." She smiled at that, but it didn't linger. She pushed herself up, brushing dust from her palms, and handed me a clipboard like it was a neutral object, something safe to focus on. "Bolts and bearings," she said. Nothing exciting. We worked side by side, quiet at first. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be filled. She moved efficiently, but I noticed how she flexed her fingers every so often, like they ached. The skin around her knuckles was dry, cracked. Hands that had done things. Lifted weight. Held on longer than they should have. Every now and then she laughed, soft, surprised by herself, and then seemed to pull it back in, like she'd given too much away. I watched the way she listened. How she tilted her head when I spoke, even when what I was saying didn't matter. How she never quite met my eyes for more than a second. "You don't have to stay if you're busy," she said at one point, rearranging a box that didn't need rearranging. "I'm not." She paused. just long enough for the truth to sit there between us. Good, she said, but her voice was careful. A little later, she missed a step coming down from a stool. I reached out without thinking, steadying her elbow. She froze. Not startled, just still. Her breath caught, shallow, and for a moment neither of us moved. I'm fine, she said too quickly. I know. I didn't let go right away. Not because I wanted to, because it felt wrong to rush it. When I did release her, she folded her arms like she was bracing against a draft that wasn't there. We took a break near the open door. Late afternoon light spilled in, catching the dust in the air. She rubbed her temples, eyes closed, long week. I asked. She nodded. Longer year. I waited. She didn't elaborate. Her jaw tightened, then relaxed. I didn't plan on coming back, she added, almost to herself. Back here. Back to anything that knows me. That was the first crack. Small. Honest. She caught herself right after and stood up, brushing invisible dirt from her jeans. Sorry, she said. It's okay, I said. You don't have to explain. She looked at me then. Really looked. Something unreadable passed over her face. Relief, maybe. Or disappointment. When my friend finally arrived, loud and late, she stepped away like she'd been waiting for the excuse. But as I left, she touched my arm lightly. Thanks for staying, she said. Her hand lingered just a second longer than necessary. I walked out with the feeling that something had been offered. Not fully, not safely, but enough that I knew I'd come back, even if I couldn't say why. It started raining before either of us noticed. We'd stayed late at the shop again, too late for it to feel accidental. The radio had gone quiet hours ago, and the only sound was the rain hitting the tin roof in uneven waves. She stood at the workbench sorting receipts that didn't need sorting, her shoulders tense like she was holding something back. You don't have to wait it out, she said without looking at me. There's an umbrella in the car. I know. I didn't move. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been expecting that answer and wasn't sure what to do with it. We ate takeout sitting on overturned crates. The noodles were cold by the time we opened them. She picked at hers, then finally gave up and set the container aside. Sorry, she said. I'm not very good company tonight. You're fine. No, she said, a small laugh slipping out. I mean, I'm not. She stared at the concrete floor, tracing a crack with the toe of her boot. My brother doesn't know this, she said quietly. But I almost left again. 2 months ago. I stayed still. Not leaning in. Not pulling away. Why didn't you? Her phone buzzed on the workbench before she could answer. She glanced at the screen and went still. I didn't see the name, but I saw what it did to her. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. Her shoulders lifted, then dropped. Sorry, she said, already standing. I have to. She stepped outside to take the call, pulling the door halfway shut behind her. Her voice was muffled by the rain, but I could hear enough. The familiar rhythm of someone who knew exactly where to push. I didn't mean to listen. I also didn't move away. When she came back in, her face was different. Closed. Careful. That was someone from before, she said, unnecessary and somehow brave. I nodded. You don't owe me, I know. She cut me off, then softened. I just didn't want you to think, she stopped. Her hand hovered in the air between us, uncertain. Think what? I asked. That I'm careless. The rain grew louder. The space between us shrank without either of us stepping closer. I could see the tiredness in her eyes now, the kind that comes from holding yourself together for too long. You're not, I said. She looked at me like she wanted to believe it. Like she almost did. For a moment, it felt like something might tip. Like if one of us moved, spoke, breathed wrong, there would be no pretending this was nothing. Her brother's headlights swept across the shop windows. She stepped back immediately. Distance reasserted itself. I should go, she said. I nodded, even though every part of me wanted to say something else. Something honest. Something that would change things. At the door, she hesitated. Turned back. If I had left, she said quietly, I don't think I would have come back this time. I opened my mouth. I don't know what I meant to say. She gave me a small, almost smile, and walked out into the rain. I stood there longer than I should have, my hand still raised, like I'd almost reached for her, and decided not to. We didn't plan to talk about it. That was the problem. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, quiet enough that the shop felt abandoned even though the lights were on. I was replacing a shelf bracket when I realized she'd been standing behind me for a while. Not close enough to touch. Close enough that I could feel it. You're drilling that wrong, she said. I know, I said. I just haven't fixed it yet. She didn't correct me. She didn't move away either. We stood there, the hum of the drill still echoing faintly in the walls. I turned it off and set it down, slower than necessary. When I turned to face her, she was watching my hands like they were safer than my eyes. This can't keep feeling like this, she said. I waited. She swallowed. Like what? I asked, even though we both knew. She looked up then. Really up. Held my gaze longer than she ever had. Like I'm holding my breath every time you walk in. The words landed softly and still managed to knock the air out of me. I don't mean, she started, then stopped herself. Her jaw tightened. I'm not saying this is anything. I just need to say it out loud before I pretend it's fine again. I leaned back against the workbench, folding my arms not to protect myself, but to keep from reaching for her. Okay. She let out a shaky breath. Okay isn't an answer. I don't know what answer you want. That's just it, she said. I don't know either. Silence settled between us. Heavy. Honest. The kind that doesn't rush to be filled. I'm too old for this, she said finally, not bitter, just tired. And you're too young to be standing here like you're waiting for something I don't know how to give. I'm not waiting, I said. She tilted her head. Then why do you keep coming back? I didn't answer right away. My throat felt tight, like the truth was lodged somewhere it didn't quite fit. Because when I'm not here, I said slowly, everything feels louder. And when I am, it's quieter, even when you're not saying anything. Her eyes softened, then darkened with something like fear. That's not fair, she whispered. I know. She stepped closer, not touching, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the way she pressed her lips together when she was trying not to say too much. We can't keep pretending this is normal, she said. I don't want normal. That made her flinch, not away, but inward. She nodded once, like she'd just confirmed something she'd been afraid of. That's what scares me, she said. Because I don't either. And every time I let myself feel that, I remember how much I lose when I choose wrong. I wanted to tell her she wouldn't lose me, that I wasn't a mistake waiting to happen. But the words felt arrogant sitting in my mouth. She stepped back, putting space between us with intention this time. I need you to understand something, she said quietly. If we keep doing this, standing too close, saying almost things, I'm going to break something I can't fix. I nodded, even though it hurt. At the door, she paused, her hand resting on the frame like she needed the support. I don't trust myself around you, she said, voice barely holding. And that's the part one don't know how to live with. I found out by accident. That's how most things that matter seem to happen. I was alone in the shop, looking for a box of invoices my friend swore he'd left near the old filing cabinet. Her coat was draped over the back of a chair, heavier than it looked, one sleeve slipping toward the floor. I meant to move it somewhere safer. That was it, just to keep it from getting dirty. When I lifted it, her phone slid out of the pocket and hit the concrete with a dull sound. The screen lit up immediately. I shouldn't have looked. I did anyway. One missed voicemail. Old. Months old. The kind of thing people don't delete because they can't. I stared at it longer than necessary, then picked up the phone and slid it back into the pocket. I could have stopped there. I should have. But when she walked in a few minutes later and saw me holding her coat, she froze. Oh, she said quietly. You. It fell, I said quickly. Your phone. She nodded, but her eyes flicked to the pocket like she was checking something fragile was still intact. There was a long pause. Not tense. Deciding. You might as well hear it, she said finally. I don't. It's not private, she said, though her voice disagreed. It's just unfinished. She took the phone out herself and pressed play before I could talk her out of it. The voice was male. Calm. Tired. Familiar in the way grief sounds once it's settled in. I don't think you understand how quiet it's been without you, the voice said. I keep expecting you to come back and correct me about something small, like I'm doing the dishes wrong, or saying a word the long way instead of the short one you liked. She stared at the wall while it played, her face still, eyes shining but dry. If you don't call me back, I'll assume this is what you needed, the voice continued. I just wanted you to know I didn't stop loving you. I just ran out of ways to say it without hurting you. The message ended. She didn't move for a few seconds. Neither did I. That was my husband, she said softly. Before he got sick. Before everything turned into waiting rooms and apologies. I swallowed. I'm sorry. She shook her head. Don't be. I left. Not because I didn't love him. Because I couldn't stand who I was becoming. She finally looked at me then, really looked, like she was seeing something she'd been avoiding. You don't remind me of him, she said. People keep assuming that's it. That you're just a shadow. I waited. You remind me of who I was before I learned how much love can cost, she finished. The words settled somewhere deep, unsettling something I hadn't named yet. That's not fair to you, she added. Or to me. I didn't ask to be compared, I said. I know, she said quickly. That's why it scares me. She stepped closer, hesitated, then rested her forehead briefly against my shoulder. Not an embrace. Not quite. Just contact. Human. Necessary. I don't want you, she whispered. But I do. And I hate myself a little for how alive that makes me feel. I didn't touch her. I didn't pull away. I just stood there, breathing in the quiet she'd trusted me with, knowing something irreversible had already shifted, whether we admitted it or not. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a moment where everything snapped into place and suddenly made sense. It was slower than that. Quieter. Like something heavy finally being set down after being carried for too long. We didn't talk for a few days after the voicemail. Not because we were avoiding each other, but because neither of us knew how to step back into the same space without pretending nothing had changed. When I did come back to the shop, she was already there, sitting at the small metal table by the window, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. You're late, she said. Yeah, I replied. I almost didn't come. She nodded like she understood that better than I'd meant it. I thought about not being here, she said. Seemed fair. Neither of us smiled. We worked quietly, not side by side this time, but near enough to feel the other's presence. She moved slower than usual. I noticed how often she paused, like she was checking in with herself before doing anything else. Eventually, she spoke without looking at me. I don't want to hurt you. The words weren't dramatic, just honest, worn smooth by repetition in her own head. I know, I said. That's not enough, she added. Knowing isn't the same as choosing. I set down the wrench I'd been holding. Then choose. She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, there was something calmer there. Not resolved, but steadier. I'm choosing to stop running, she said. Not toward you. Just to stop. That's okay, I said. I'm not asking you to go anywhere. She finally turned to face me. That's the problem, she said quietly. You never have. We sat on the low step near the door as the light outside softened, neither of us in a hurry to leave. The shop felt smaller without being cramped, safer without being sealed. I don't know what this is, she said, and I don't want to name it yet. Then don't, I replied. She exhaled, long and slow, and leaned her shoulder lightly against mine. Not testing, just resting. The contact felt deliberate, like she'd finally stopped arguing with gravity. After a while, her hand slid onto the bench between us. Not reaching, just there. I let my fingers rest beside hers, close enough that the heat mattered. She didn't pull away. This doesn't erase anything, she said softly. My past, your future, the ways this could go wrong. I know, but it's real, she added. And I'm tired of pretending I don't want real things. I turned my hand palm up. Didn't look at her when she placed her fingers in mine. The touch was gentle, almost cautious, but it stayed. We sat like that until the light outside faded completely, the shop quiet except for our breathing. No promises, no plans, just the shared understanding that we weren't standing on opposite sides of this anymore. And somehow, that felt like enough to stay. I'm telling this now from a place that feels quieter than before. Not settled, not perfect, just honest. We didn't announce anything. There was no moment where we sat someone down and explained what we were to each other. Life just adjusted around us. I started showing up without excuses. She stopped bracing herself every time the door opened. The first real change was small. She laughed one morning, really laughed, at something stupid I said about a stripped bolt, then stopped herself out of habit. This time, instead of apologizing, she let it finish. The sound lingered in the room like it had permission. I noticed how she slept better. Not longer, just deeper. How she no longer flinched when her phone buzzed. How she'd sometimes reach for my hand without thinking, then pause, like she was surprised she didn't need to pull back anymore. And me? I stopped standing outside doors without reasons. I learned that wanting someone doesn't mean you're entitled to them. That staying can be braver than chasing. That restraint isn't the opposite of desire. It's proof you respect what's fragile. She never became younger. I never became older in the ways people warned us about. What changed was the space between us. It stopped feeling like a gap we had to explain and started feeling like something we shared responsibility for. One night, much later, we sat on the hood of my car watching the shop lights flicker off one by one. She leaned into me the way she always did now, without checking herself first. "You know," she said, "I used to think love was about choosing the right time. I waited. I think it's about choosing not to disappear when it finally arrives." I didn't answer. I just kissed the top of her head, gentle, familiar. She closed her eyes like she trusted the moment to hold. We're still careful. We're still learning. Some days, the weight of everything she's lived through shows up unannounced. Some days, I wonder who I'd be if I'd never knocked on that door. But here's what I know now. Love doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like sitting quietly beside someone who's been alone too long and not asking them to be anyone else. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?